Hi, my name is Thais Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I'm going to go through some of the questions from inside of our discussion forum upvoting section where I pick the top 10 questions a week and just dive into some of them. So this will just be the top 5 questions. These questions will include, how do I explain to a DA why he feels unsure about progressing in our relationship? Any tools for getting out of FA deactivation or trance mode, dismissive avoidance and shame, how to change the pattern of feeling like a bad person or partner. Is it breakup grief or just plain addiction? And becoming more dismissive avoidant as I make changes, why? So I haven't actually clicked and read these questions yet. I like to just sort of free flow when we do this. But before I dive into all of this, we are still doing a sale to support our community. The coupon code is with you, all one word, for 25% off membership bundles for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. So feel free. I'll put a little link in this video and in the description box below if you want to dive into there. And yeah, our courses this month are how to overcome loneliness and the science of building connections with others. And then we have a whole course on communication scripts. So how to actually, we have 50 different scenarios, and we go through and we model out like how to communicate potential objections, resolutions, so that people can really understand what it means to communicate and work situations through. So without further ado, I will, just making sure my microphone is on, I will touch on these questions. So the first question says, met my DA over 3 years ago. We have 2 breakups and periods of no contact. There are some challenges in between. And this is A's question. I bought a new house in March to be closer. And after I moved, he sometimes helped and came by, and then COVID happened. And we started forming our bubble and spent a lot of days together. Then he obviously was showing up. I'm not like going to go through all the details, but then this person was showing up and really making an effort. Then you said there's no pressure and you want to take it one day at a time, but this person feels unsure about progressing in the relationship. And there's a big jump between that and spending a lot of time together, and sort of thinks about just being good friends. How can I explain his feelings to him without upsetting the progress? Okay, so number 1, here's what's probably happening, okay? This is really common for dismissive avoidance. Dismissive avoidance will often feel feelings, and then the moment vulnerability is triggered or required, so the moment there's like a big vulnerable part, often those feelings get in competition with pain points of feeling unsafe because of their subconscious programming around vulnerability. So often, like in the dating phases, in the early phases, it's like not a big deal. And then as soon as, you know, it's time to think about committing or getting closer, these things that require vulnerability, it triggers all their subconscious pain points. Like, I will be unsafe. Vulnerability is unsafe. I could be trapped. Commitment is scary, or commitment feels like pain in the past. I could be rejected or abandoned long term, which is a very unconscious belief, not something that most dismissive avoidants identify with. But when you dig in there, that tends to be a huge thing for so many of them. And so a lot of these things are triggered. So now you have the competition of needs, the need for connection actually actively competing with all the fears and the need to stay safe. So one thing I would be careful of and mindful of, just based on the way this is worded, is it's like, how can I explain his feelings to him? As soon as you get into the space of thinking you're going to explain somebody else's feelings to them, you leave room for blind spots, and it's going to trigger the dismissive avoidant, because they're going to think, no, you can't know my feelings more than I know my feelings, and that will actually make them feel unsafe. So instead of trying to explain something to them, I would ask questions. I would say things like, hey, is it possible that you just have, you know, that you're interested in the relationship, you're interested in more commitment, but you maybe have some like subconscious fears or things that are actually like stored within you or living within you that are creating the fears, maybe not fears about the relationship, but fears about relationships. because of something that happened before me, and maybe it's not about us, it's about things that are going on inside of you. And if that's the case, what might those things be? Where do they come from? Is there anything you need from me to help resolve them? And then what I would do too is I would get to a point, quite honestly, where it sounds like you're showing up so well, and it sounds like he's responding so well based on some of the things you've shared in here, like some of the details I didn't share in this video, but I can see some of them in here. And I think something that's really important is to be able to share a deadline, like a timeline or a boundary, really. So it doesn't have to be like, hey, there's no pressure. But if you get to a point where it's like just dragging on and things aren't happening, you have to make sure you show yourself too, and show up for yourself and take yourself fully into consideration. So you might say something like, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but I also want to let you know, like, a long-term relationship and a romantic commitment is something that's important to me. And while I absolutely can see where you're coming from, and if there was progression, if the needle was moving and there was something consistent happening between us, then I would definitely be happy to be patient. But if there's so much inconsistency where you're saying, I'm not sure if we should even, we should take a few months apart and then see if we feel like we can progress. I know what my needs are and what I'm interested in, and I can't necessarily promise you that if we completely disconnect, that I'm going to be waiting around for that entire time, because that's not fair to myself, and I have to show up for myself too. And so that's how I would sort of word that. You can take, I'm like over explaining because I'm trying to make sure my points are coming across in the explanation for you, but take what feels right from that, and it's going to be a really important conversation to have at some point. But make that point based on the deadline for like what you're willing, like how long you're willing to be patient for, and how much the person is actually actively putting into the relationship, and if it's satisfying your needs or not. So great question. The next question is E's question, and it says, any tools for getting out of FA deactivation or trance mode? So it says, when the FA is clearly sabotaging, using all of the deactivation strategies and even demonizing a person, is there anything you want to do to stop it, or do you need to just step aside and watch the burnout? Amazing question. I love that you're like becoming aware of your deactivating. I love that you're able to witness it and even describe it as demonizing, because often the fearful avoidant does do this, and it's based on like a lot of fear that comes up, right? A lot of fear of like things going wrong or being hurt. And so it creates like, think of like fearful avoidance, the degree that they're going to deactivate and demonize or push somebody away, or say all the reasons this person can't be in your life, in your mind, is going to be directly correlated to like how much wounding is being triggered in the situation. Not always the case, but like vast majority of the time is. And so no, you do not just need to step aside and watch the burnout. Question the stories you're telling yourself. Let's say you're like, this person, I'm never going to talk to them again. I don't need them in my life. They don't do anything for me. Okay, hold on. Can you 100% know? Or are there actually things that the person does do? Are there kind parts to the person? Try to question the stories you're telling yourself and equilibrate them. And this actually brings you back to like a balanced state of mind, which is the place we're always trying to get to, is not like exclusively seeing the negative in somebody, exclusively seeing the positive in somebody, but actually a fair and balanced perspective where we're trying to go, you know what? Yes, the person hurt me right now, and I'm upset that the person didn't send me back a text message or spoke to me with tone or whatever it is. But, they're not always rude. They're not always disrespectful. They're probably having a bad day. I definitely need to set a boundary and communicate and show up for myself and say, hey, this is important to me. But this doesn't mean like I should never talk to the person again, and really like work to equilibrate those stories. And that's actually the way to stop deactivating. And it's a really important part for the fearful avoidant in terms of becoming secure. I might even do like a full long form video about that. So dismissive avoidance and shame, how to change the pattern of feeling like a bad person or partner. And this person says, if a DA has a lot of shame, sorry, I keep checking my microphone's like sitting on the couch instead of on the table, because I think the sound quality is better for this one. I have a different one that I am using lately, but this one's like for webinars and anyways, so I'm just checking on it a lot. If a DA has a lot of shame around being a bad person and a bad partner, would that subconsciously make them act and think in ways that makes them a bad partner? Like, would that make them ruminate over trauma thoughts that are deactivating thoughts and make them act in ways that hurts a partner and pushes a partner or loved ones away? You talked about being against the problem and for the solution. How can this be applied in such a case? So I just want to acknowledge this person's awareness, because you basically described the exact dynamics that are going on. So a couple things. Number one, I have absolutely consistently, like as a massive pattern, seen that when dismissive avoidants are put down and made to feel like they're a bad partner or criticized for their mistakes, they actually usually end up recreating or repeating that mistake. I can't tell you how many times I've seen in like working with couples, things where like the wife is like, I can't believe you forgot to do this, and gets mad, and then the forgetful thing happens again between that session where she was upset about that and the next week, even like 2 more times. And versus if the communication is like, hey, it's really important to me that you remember when we do this. You don't have to be perfect, but I need you to try a little bit harder. Here's how you can do it. Thank you so much. That form of communication is being for a solution. Being against the problem is going, I can't believe you did this. And there is a big difference. And because of something called the ironic processing theory in psychology, the subconscious mind, when it's emotionally imprinted, there's 2 things happening. The subconscious mind, when it's emotionally imprinted, right? So when you have something where there's a strong emotional output, like dismissive avoidants are so sensitive to criticism, it really hurts them. So when you're like, I can't believe you forgot to do this, this concept or idea of like, I forget this stuff is getting really dramatically imprinted over a fairly short period of time, which number one increases the likelihood. And the subconscious mind doesn't hear negatives. It's not like, I can't believe you forgot to do this. It just hears like, you forgot to do this. And it's the same reason, it's the same basis of like the concept when people explain the ironic processing theory is like, if I say to you, don't think of the pink elephant, you think of the pink elephant because the subconscious mind speaks through emotion and it speaks through imagery. And so when you say, forget to do this, the person pictures that. It's attached with a lot of emotion because they feel bad, they feel criticized, and then it's imprinting them faster because the subconscious is programmed through emotion and through repetition. And so usually that, number one, I think is one of the root causes of why this increases. But number two, you hit the nail on the head here too, which is, would that make them act and think in ways because they ruminate over trauma thoughts and deactivating thoughts? Yes. Then when the person also feels bad, they start deactivating. And then of course, they're also more likely to repeat mistakes. So amazing question. You guys are like just, wow. People's questions in the webinars, people's questions in here, it's like I can see people are not just like doing the work, but they're like really getting the work at a very deep level. So the next question is it breakup grief or just plain addiction? After 6 months, my brain cannot let it go. So this person says, I've been struggling with letting go of a relationship and it feels like an addiction I'm not able to break. Me, DA with an FA, textbook dynamic of me needing my autonomy and freedom, my FA feeling unimportant, hurt, and angry, and asking for bigger commitment when I was already as committed as I could and worked on changing what I could. I used all my energy and love to actively listen when something came up, to reassure, answer, and talk about the same issues many times as I was asked to. I felt like I was never enough. Anything I did or changed was enough, and my FA felt the same. I've worked through my feelings and have allowed myself to grieve. I listened to the needs that were met and the things that I missed from the relationship. I listed the needs that were met and the things I missed from the relationship. I'm working on meeting those needs, but when I'm with friends and feel loved and happy, I miss that relationship. I constantly think about the closeness and intimacy we had and the moments we shared that worked, and it hurts so much. I find myself daydreaming. Okay, so beautiful. So number one, you are absolutely recognizing and number one, congratulations, like good for you for showing up and noticing this and doing this. And it sounds like you really, really tried. Okay. Now, when the brain is having a hard time letting go, there's a sign. It's usually a sign of the brain being still exclusively more positive than negative in that relationship. even though for the relationship not to be working or alive currently in the way that it was, they're usually just by technicality has to have been more negative than positive. And so part of like getting to that point of full acceptance is by seeing that there still is more negative than positive, and really seeing that. So the first thing I would do is I would sit down and I would make a list of all the things I'm holding on to, and I would look at the downsides of all of those things. And it's not a fun thing, but it's a really good way to like break that connection to just exclusively seeing things through like a one-sided lens. So I would sit down and I would go, okay, I missed the intimacy, but what was the cost of the intimacy? Well, then the person had a lot of expectations, and sometimes I lost the relationship to myself because I felt like I was on the hamster wheel, always trying and not being able to do enough. So I would go through like step by step and do it. I know it's going to feel, sometimes the subconscious mind's like, no, but I want to hang on to the good in the relationship. And if that's the case, that's also just a symptom of your brain really wanting to hang on to the need for intimacy. And that's really what I'm going to bring up in like part number 2 here. So just acknowledge that, but do the work on part number 1. Part number 2 is that sometimes you have to imagine like the degree of the void is going to create the degree of the longing. So because the brain's trying to always achieve homeostasis. So if there's like a huge void that you've experienced, right? Then with intimacy, let's say growing up, but then this person brought that intimacy to you, but then there was also pain that came with it, then your brain is still holding on to the positives that came from the intimacy because it's lacking. And it sounds even like when you're with friends and you feel loved and happy, that's actually triggering it. And so what that tells me is that there's probably still a big void there that you just haven't filled fully. And that means excellent, meet the needs from friends and others, but also intimacy with self is going to be such an important thing. And it's also such an important component of healing dismissive avoidant attachment style. And that means showing up, feeling your feelings, checking in with yourself, being present with yourself, letting your emotions like fully rush over you, understanding them, working to regulate them, using the tools, doing the reprogramming work, like really building out that relationship to yourself. And something that's important to recognize here too is that sometimes it's not an immediate thing, because it's no different than if you have a long-term relationship and the person just disappears for a couple of years and then comes back. Like you might be like, wow, I'm so excited for them to be back, but you might have to rebuild trust. You might have to like reconnect over time. And once you start connecting over time and seeing, okay, yes, this person can safely and consistently meet my needs, then the brain starts to naturally and subconsciously go to that thing as a resource and rely and depend on it in a healthy way. And part of that is like rebuilding that intimacy and relationship to self, which truly is, am I seeing myself? Am I hearing myself? Am I understanding myself? Am I feeling and humanizing myself? Am I validating myself? And these are major principles of attunement talked about by Dr. Daniel Siegel. So these are really important things to connect to recognize. And when you can have that awareness and do that work, that's when you're going to see that that void really heals. So beautiful question. Beautiful awareness yet again. Awesome work, you guys. Okay, so then the last question I have is becoming more DA as I make more changes. So it appears from the attachment style quiz I'm becoming more DA, but also more secure as well. Okay, sorry, I didn't read that properly. It appears from the last attachment style quiz I took a few days ago, I'm becoming more dismissive avoidant, but more secure as well. While my APFA percentages have dropped. That I'm pleased with, but my concern is the DA. Is it common to go through that while healing or changing? Will it eventually level itself out? So it's such a beautiful question. I get this all the time. Yes. There's 2 reasons for this. Number 1, the attachment style quiz is self-reporting, which means there's going to be natural biases. And it's really about your reference point. With the attachment style quiz, it's going to matter. So for example, and not even with the quiz, just your reference point as you go from anxious, preoccupied, or fearful avoidant to secure. Here's why. Anxious, preoccupied, and fearful avoidants tend to love through codependency, tend to have codependent behaviors, traits, characteristics. Number 2, it's a natural and normal thing when we recognize that we're coming out of trauma and we are healing to respect the fragility of our healing process. So there's 2 things that are happening here at the same time. First, you're becoming more secure. and you're loving not from a codependent space. You're interacting not from a codependent space. That healthy interdependency to somebody who's been codependent maybe since you can remember, or had a lot of codependent qualities maybe your whole life, or from very, very early childhood, that's going to feel strange and dismissive avoidant. And it's not actually, and I see this all the time with people, it's not necessarily that you're like becoming dismissive avoidant, but that you are feeling more of the avoidant side, or noticing more of the avoidant side, and it's highlighted in how you're showing up because it's something you're not used to, it's something new, and it's something that's not codependent, and you're probably still looking at relating from the space of codependency that you've been used to. So that's number one. And number two, and so obviously it's going to show up with self-reporting. Number two, when you're in a dynamic where you are, like, let's say you hurt your toe, right? Your natural instinct when you're hurt is to like care for something, look out for it, limp, get on crutches, whatever it is. When we're emotionally healing and we're noticing and we're starting to become aware of all these things and doing the work, we naturally do protect ourselves as well. And so we can have like a stronger relationship to ourselves, as well as the brain. When we haven't had a relationship to ourselves for so long, we'll be very eager to equilibrate that. So the brain will like really go into overcompensating for that. And that's an important thing to recognize as well. So it's really those three things taking place. And what I will tell you is that it's absolutely a good sign. Fantastic job. Do not stress. It absolutely levels out, and it levels out as you achieve homeostasis, as you feel empowered in relationship to self, as you trust interdependency instead of codependency, and as you've equilibrated this void of having minimal or a lacking relationship to self for so long, and now you're meeting your own needs and you're regulating your own emotions, and it feels empowering, and the mind goes there and focuses, and as that bucket gets filled up, then we return to a space of really being able to healthily function in interdependent dynamics. So wonderful questions, loved all of these. Thank you guys. Thank you for watching here on YouTube as well. And if you're getting a lot of value out of this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.